and welcome to the Provincial Winter Schools 2022. We have the privilege of doing the Business Study Paper 2, and when we look towards our trial and our final exams, we are going to look ahead to prepare for success. The idea about this particular winter schools is to provide you the opportunity to spend some time looking at past questions from past papers and not just you studying the topic as it were, because we feel that most learners just prepare for the topic and not look at the question papers. We are looking for you to achieve better results, and therefore we'd like you to take this opportunity and embrace it with both hands to be able to flip it on its head completely and achieve the success that you know you can get. And therefore, we want to start by looking at the real goods, the exam questions that have been posed in the past, and we're looking for you to be able to take those questions and allow yourself to give you the opportunity to look at those questions and answer them before you start looking at the topic. Use your prior knowledge, use what you've learned in the past, and then once you've finished answering the questions, move on to going through the work to allow yourself to have a deeper understanding and a sense of what exactly do I need to do as a learner answering the question, as well as applying it in the exam. So we want to give you this opportunity. We want you to not be nervous and scared. We want you to read. We want you to understand, and we want you to look at keywords. These are possible questions that we feel that are particularly important and could end up being in your final papers, but we want you to feel comfortable with it, and this is the reason why we are giving you the opportunity to work through questions with us. So without further ado, we would like to move to question 1, and question 1 is the question that one would think you'd start with. I'm going to suggest that you flip that on its head too. You start with section C, you move to section A, and then you attempt section B. Why? Because we're going to call the cab once, we're going to all our different places, and then when it comes to section B, we're going to answer 2 of those questions. So section A deals with your shorter questions, and it requires skills. When we look at section A, question 1, the very first thing we're going to come across is multiple choice questions. Now, it becomes very important that when we read, we don't just read the answers. We first look at what the question is asking us. In this case, we're looking at directors of a company that should exercise ethical and effective leadership. Through what? Now, the words that pop out in this particular instance should be ethical and effective leadership. But how can we do ethical and effective leadership? Can we do that by means of a bribery? Can we do that by means of an annual general meeting? So what I've done is I've looked at 2 of the answers that could potentially throw us off, but don't directly speak to the question itself. So when one looks at a multiple choice question, we look at the questions first. We then look at the 2 answers that could have a potential throw off, but it pertains to what the question is about. And in 1.1.1's case, we are looking at B and C being the 2 that could potentially, or if you see A and C, you know that there's going to be 2 that are completely wrong, and 2 that are going to be 1 being correct and 1 that's going to distract you. So in this case, the popping words would be exercise ethical and effective leadership. How can this be done? Our answer, corporate governance. Corporate is what is a business should be able to do, and governance is something that needs to be done throughout the business, but it can only be done the right way, and it can only be done by means of your leadership. They lead the way. Please also understand that directors of a company also link itself to corporate. Corporate is where things happen. It's the business, and directors are found within the businesses and the companies that they are directing. 1.1.2. Again, I'm looking at the word that pops out, the set of morally accepted values of a business that is displayed by the management and the employees. Now, this becomes very, very important because when we look at a set of morally accepted values, the first thing that should come to mind is values, values of a business. Who displays what? And in this case, they're asking for management and the employees that function within that business. Again, look at your answers. I'm looking at the word professionalism. I'm looking at business ethics. I'm looking at code of conduct. They all follow a thread that links directly to that particular question. So in this case, we look at D, operating procedures. The procedures deal with what is happening within the workplace. It's already there. So the question is referring to the set of morally accepted values of a business. Is it professionalism? Is it a code of conduct? Because when we look at those things, your employees are bound by the code of conduct. And therefore we look at professionalism, and everybody needs to be professional in whatever they do when one finds oneself within a business. So in this case, I've looked at a professional individual following the code of conduct. We've cancelled out operating procedures. Why? Because that is something that everybody in a business should be able to do because there is a procedure, it's written, it's there. Professionalism stems from code of conduct. That is how one should behave. So by process of elimination, we would look at business ethics being the correct answer. Again, ethics is generally something that is accepted because it is the right thing to do. And we move on to 1.1.3. We're highlighting the key concept here again. Businesses engages in price fixing to force smaller competitors out of the market. Again, I look at my key concept, price fixing, negative, not ethical behavior. That's before I've looked at the answers. So in my mind, I am knowing that the question is asking me when the business engages in price fixing to force out those competitors in the market. Are they looking at my behavior as being professional or unprofessional, where I look at C and D? Or am I looking at A or B, whereby it is ethical, something that is correct, or unethical, being incorrect? So straight away, I've created the link based on what the question is asking of me. Price fixing is not the correct thing to do. But it's not a behavior that's happening within the workplace. So therefore, by process of elimination, I'm going to cancel out C and D because it's about the behavior. We're not asking about the behavior here. We're looking at whether it is right or wrong. When the business engages in price fixing, and I'm forcing out smaller competitors out of the market, is it unethical? Is it ethical? So from our knowledge that we have gained, we are looking at this behavior being unethical. It's not the right thing to do. I hope we are making sense, and we are looking at the key concepts. These multiple choice questions require us to know our content. And in order for us to know our content, we then need to be able to apply it in short questions. Let's look at 1.1.4. A company should appoint internal and external auditors to audit financial statements. Now, this becomes really, really big because this contains information about the finances of the company. And the question is asking, what does this refer to according to the King Code principle? Again, King Code principle. When we look at our content that we have learnt, we are looking at King Code. Straight away, we should think of, there are 3 principles. Those 3 principles link in with one another. So every single thing that we are doing in terms of the King Code report, we are looking at ethical behavior as a collective because it's the right thing to do. Now, King Code principle talks about those 3 principles. It talks about transparency, it talks about accountability, and it talks about responsibility. And as a collective, D is summing everything up because that is ethical behavior. Now we find ourselves in a bit of a pickle. What do we do? How do we go about it? When we look at the key of the question, we're looking at what the company should do. So we know it's ethical behavior because that is a behavior that all companies should approach. Which means we're now left with transparency, accountability, and responsibility. And now you're saying to yourself, but yes, it sounds exactly the same. That's okay. We work from what we know. When we look at transparency, we're looking at transparency, meaning I can see through it. We use a data projector and we put that transparency on it and we write on it. That transparency means I can see straight through. That generally speaks to audits being done regularly. When we look at accountability, I as a company am held to account. Now, what are you held to account for? You're held to account for your financial statements. And therefore, that one stems to ring more of a bell because I need to account for my finances. And it's what a company should do. So therefore, when I look at responsibility, it is something which a company should be able to do because that is what's required of them. You are responsible for that because it requires ethical leadership. So therefore, I can cancel out my transparency and my responsibility, and I'm held to account for what my financial statements look like because I can't do it. But my auditors can do it, and therefore it is above board, and I'm held to account as a company, and my auditors are also held to account by doing what is right. 1.1.5, an employee takes an extended lunch break to do his or her personal business activities. The important aspect here again is you will see that there are two groups of answers. Is this the right behavior in terms of ethical? Is it the wrong behavior, which makes it unethical? Is it unprofessional behavior or is it professional behavior? Is the company which this employee is working for doing something wrong or right? Or is it the employee, the person, that is doing something incorrect or incorrect? So when we look at our answers, the things that should pop out would be the employee, an extended lunch break, to do personal business. Now we know you are employed as an employee to do your job. Now you're coming to work, you're stealing company time because you're taking longer lunch breaks and you're doing your personal work. Who are we talking about here? We're talking about the employee, and therefore the employee's behavior is the incorrect behavior because of the extended lunch breaks and doing their personal business. So therefore, we can cancel out A and B, and our answer would be unprofessional, because when we look at unprofessional, it's doing something that you're not supposed to do. It's not unethical because you're breaking the law, you're still at work, but it becomes unprofessional behavior from the employee because you are now stealing company time, but you're still at work. When we look at our section A, we move in from quick multiple choice that gives us 4 answers, and we move towards the statements. Now the statements works a little bit differently to our multiple choice. Instead of having 4 answers, we now only have 2 answers. And those 2 answers you should be able to link up by reading the words within the given block. Now, if we look at the words for this particular activity, we have put the words together that link up, so they're next to each other, to show you that there's going to be a correct answer and there's going to be what we call a distractor. So it could fit in line with the statement, but it's going to distract you because it's incorrect. So my tip and hint for this particular section is to first read your questions. Go through your questions and then have a look and see the words in the table. Try and link the words together so that you are able to have an understanding that I have one correct answer, I have one incorrect answer. Now let's look at 1.2.1. The procedure or the rules followed by a business in the pursuit of its objectives. So again, looking at our keywords, we have procedures and rules, we have the business, and we have business objectives. Now, in looking at those words, the very first thing that we need to look at is, what does my business do in terms of procedures and rules? Is that how we operate? Is that the code of conduct? Is that how we would do things as a business practice? So our 2 words for the first one would be code of conduct and business practice. Again, we looked at our keywords. procedures or rules, and our objectives. Now, in this particular case, code of conduct refers to how the employees should conduct themselves. When I'm talking about a procedure, I'm talking about what must happen within our business, what must be practiced every single day, which then gives us the hint that business practice would be the correct answer because it's linking to what can I do in this particular instance. Why? I want to do this particular aspect so that I can achieve the objective of the business. So, for example, a classic example that we talk about these days is when it comes to a fire evacuation or a fire drill. There is a very specific procedure that I need to follow in order to achieve the objective. And the objective in a fire drill is to take everybody out of the building as safely and swiftly as possible. So that is a practice that my business must adhere to. My code of conduct in this case is incorrect based on the fact that it's what the behavior should be of how the employee should be conducting themselves within business. We're looking at 1.2.2. Again, we're looking at the words. So because we've completed 1.2.1, we're now going to cancel out the words that we've already identified because we now know that we're utilizing those two. So we don't want to clog our brains and our eyes with what we've already used. Because remember, you cannot use the same word twice. So that's another tip and hint that we can give you is when you're reading your answers and you look at question 1.2 and you see that you've used the word twice or the words twice, go back and recheck because you are only allowed to use the word or the words once. Now we're looking at emotional forces that influence the behavior of a team and the way that the team achieves its goals. So a lot is happening there. But when we look at the words that have been given to us, we see that we are talking about a behavior of a team. But we're not just talking about the behavior of the team, we're talking about the way that the team achieves its goals. So now the first word that jumps out at me there would be team dynamics and teamwork. Great. Now you're saying to me, but ma'am, they all say team. Yes, you're right. But let's look at the question again. Emotional forces that influence the behavior of the team. So we're all working together as a team and we want to achieve the goals that we set out. Now I stop and I say, what is going to influence behavior? Emotional forces. So emotional is something that we experience, but it's going to have very big influence on the behavior of the team. Whereas teamwork is the work that we're doing as a team that achieves the goals. So if we look at those two words, the key concept that pops out there is the emotional forces that will influence the team behavior. And therefore, we're looking at the answer being team dynamics. The dynamic of my team could present high emotions, could present low emotions, but then it's going to affect the way that I achieve my goals. And now we scratch out team dynamics and teamwork. We've used it. Don't look at it again. 1.2.3. The process of working together to achieve similar goals. Sure. Now we're saying that we're working together to achieve similar goals. Now, when you sit in a classroom and your teacher has just said, let's get into groups and work together, the first thing that stems from that would be, I'm working together. When I work together, yes, it definitely does require a commitment to both of you or the members in the group. But when we're working together to achieve similar goals, there are two C's. It's not just about the commitment. It's also about the collaboration. That collaboration is meaning that I am coming to the group and I am working and giving of myself. When I speak about collaboration, the first word that I think of is coming together. And that coming together becomes very important because it is about the action of working with somebody to produce something. Yes, it's all good and well that I have your commitment. That's brilliant. But when we look at the process of working together, I need an action. And you will have a look and see that collaboration has two A's. That collaboration, I need action because I want to produce something. I teach all learners to look at the words, to look at what jumps out. I can only do this if I know my content. But if I have an understanding of the word, working together is collaboration because together we can achieve the success. If I have your commitment and I have no action, sure, there's no working together. You've just said that you've given your commitment. Cancel the two C's. So now we're left with 4 answers. And now we're looking at 1.2.4. The way people react towards each other in a group. Now, let's be honest here. We need to look at what happens in everyday life. You are in a classroom, you're on the playground, and you see people interacting with each other in your various groups. So therefore, we're looking at 2 particular answers here. We could pull out interpersonal behavior, and we can pull out interpersonal attitudes. They have exactly the same start. But is it the attitude or is it the behavior that this question is referring to? Let's have a look. The way people react towards each other in a group. Can I use my attitude? Or is it the interpersonal behavior? It's the individual. The way people react towards each other in a group. Our answer would be interpersonal behavior. The behavior of an individual. As you are coming towards a group, it's about that interpersonal relationship or communication between the people. That's going to determine your behavior. Because your behavior, people are going to react to. People can also react to your attitude if you have a bad attitude, but in this case, it's the way people react towards each other. And therefore, we're looking at interpersonal behavior. Remember to please scratch out or draw a line through the ones that you have already utilized. 1.2.5. Discrimination, unfair treatment, poor working conditions are examples of. So, last two that are in use, we can call up those last two. How am I going to know the difference? They sound similar? My big tip and hint. When we look at a grievance, it has got a G, and that G is a C with a little line. That line represents a step in the process of taking it further because you are aggrieved. It is a problem. And based on that problem, you need to take it to the next level. When we look at conflict, everybody can have conflict within a business because the sea is open, and therefore everybody is allowed to have an opinion. And everybody can differ with that. And again, I have a problem within the business, but it's because I disagree with your opinion. That does not mean I'm breaking a law. When I look at a grievance, I'm looking at something that somebody is really upset with. And that grievance is something that I cannot ignore. It has to go through a formal process because it's not being resolved. And it's something that's going to hamper my working ability. And when we look at the word discrimination, when we look at unfair treatment, that is not allowed. That's not we're going to have a difference of opinion. That lends itself towards a grievance, a formal complaint. And therefore, in this particular case, we're looking at the word grievance. We cancel out our last two and do yourselves a favor, grade 12s, go back, go and read, go and check. You've highlighted your keywords. You're looking to see that you have not used the same word twice. It takes a second, a minute or two, but take it and be sure. Moving on to match the column. Match the column is also something that requires a little bit of thought, looking and reading through column B and making sure that you've got your highlighters and you're highlighting the column or the words or the statement that makes sense to what the column A word is requiring. Use your highlighters, underline, engage with the statement, but also be very clear when you look at column B. Column B is going to have the correct answer and it's going to have a distractor. So for this particular question, we're going to look at the following terms. You will see that the very first term is norming. You will also see that 1.3.5 talks about forming. Now from your class discussions on team performance, you will see that we're talking about stages of team performance. Now, as I've said, the very first thing that you need to do is you need to highlight the statements that link with each other. And this becomes key because we look at the statements and we make sure that we're linking the correct ones. But if you look towards your statements, you will see that we have highlighted 4 statements. Those 4 statements link to your team stages. Now we need to underline what is our key concepts. Our key concepts being, what is it that we're referring to in our stages of team development? Observe one another's behavior. Be polite to each other. And straight away, we need to have an understanding of what happens within each of those stages. And when we observe one another's behavior, when we are polite to one another, sure, we have formed as a team. So we've read our statements and we've highlighted the ones that pertain to stages of team development. So the one that looks the most correct, you have highlighted. Observe one another's behavior. Be polite with one another. I'm coming together as a team. I haven't interacted or done anything yet. It's still the beginning phases where we're getting to get the members in the room and we start talking and we start observing what takes place. We now look towards team members accept that they need to work in harmony with one another. Now, when I think of harmony and working in harmony, I always think of a river. I think of a boat on the river. When you are using your oars, you need to work in harmony with the water and the oar, because else it's going to be kind of stormy and you're going to go in the incorrect way. When I talk about working in harmony, I'm talking about norming. I'm talking about norming in terms of everything is accepted. I accept that I'm rowing on the river. I accept that I am using my oar to get me to the next step or the next point. So we're norming. It's natural. We're now moving on and we look at the next concept. In form of a statement, we're looking at disagreement between 2 or more parties in the workplace. We now look at it when an individual or group has a work-related issue. I'm now talking a disagreement. I'm talking about an individual or a group that has a work-related issue. I'm underlining my key concepts. A disagreement. When you see the word disagreement, I'm allowed to have a difference of opinion and we can disagree. You can disagree in the way that I'm doing this, but it does not mean it is an individual or group that has a work-related issue. We're having a disagreement. Unauthorized use of business resources. The use of false or misleading statements in advertising. We're talking about false and misleading statements, and we're looking at unauthorized use of business resources. Now, you will definitely agree with me here. When you see the word unauthorized, it means you don't have permission. But a false or misleading statement in advertising, it's something that has happened and somebody hasn't checked. Therefore, based on that, unauthorized use of business unauthorized use of business resources can only be our key concept there in terms of business resources, and it can only link to unprofessional business practice. It's unauthorized, which makes it unprofessional. You did not obtain permission. Can we see that we've only got F and G unmarked? which now leads us to our last statement, being expert. Now, when I see the word expert, I think of what? I think of somebody who knows exactly what they're doing. They have the knowledge. In your statement, it says, refrain from attacking the views, as it will lead to confrontation with him or her. Or G, protect other employees from being intimidated by the employee. Attacking their views. Would you, if you are an expert, attack their views? Or would you protect the employee? Would you look at them being intimidated? When we look at our expert, refrain from attacking their views. You have the knowledge. So don't attack their views because you are the expert. You are the person with the expert opinions, the experience. Because if you do attack their views, it's going to lead to a confrontation. And we don't want to do that. And therefore, G is completely left unmanned because protecting other employees from being intimidated, you cannot allow anybody to be intimidated in your workplace. And nobody can do that. So when we've looked at all of our column B statements, we've underlined it, we've highlighted our key concepts, and we've made sure that we've looked at our answers. So when we look at 1.3, we're looking at J. When we're looking at 1.3.2, we're looking at B. 1.3, conflict, which we have as D. 1.3.4, the expert, F. 1.3.5, forming, you're looking at H. That then concludes section A for this part of the presentation. You will have a little bit of time to just look at question 2, and then we will continue with the discussion.